welcome to A Game for Your Thoughts. Today we're going to be talking about Resident Evil HD Remaster. Resident Evil HD Remaster is a remaster of the 2002 GameCube edition of Resident Evil, which that game was highly acclaimed and really worth checking out, and I'd absolutely recommend checking it out for yourself. But the HD Remaster I feel like does best at giving the classic Resident Evil experience like the one on the GameCube, but more accessible to a modern audience. The story of Resident Evil actually is pretty simple. Well, it starts out simple, but gets far more complex as you go on. But it all starts out when in Raccoon City there gets reports of these grisly murders where people were found eaten. And so the STARS team is sent out to go and figure out what is going on. But when the Bravo team loses contact and they're not heard from, it's up to Alpha team to go in and figure out what's going on. But when Alpha team arrives, they find things are far more complex than it seems. After landing in the woods and finding the crashed helicopter from Bravo team, they get attacked by zombie dogs and are forced into this mansion. And when they get in the mansion, people start going missing, and they find that there's more zombies around, and so they have to figure out what's going on and how the hell to get out of there, and that's where this game starts. So, like I said, the story gets more complex. As you explore this mansion, you'll find notes and diary entries and things like that of people who lived in the house, or there was some more sinister things going on. And so these notes and journal entries detailed these people's final moments of being like, hey, this is way more complex and things are terrible, and unfortunately I'm going to be turned into one of these monsters, and I'm sorry, I love you, and things like that. It actually kind of was a little depressing. But exploring the house and finding all the lore and unveiling more of the mystery was one of the best things about this game. So real quick, at the very beginning of the game, you get to choose if you want to play as Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, and while choosing either one, there is a lot of differences. It doesn't affect the overall narrative. The game's going to play out largely the same. But because you choose one of these other characters, there's going to be some side character that's going to have a big effect. And I played mostly as Jill. I find Jill far better. It's just kind of easier, and Chris is really hard. And I find Barry as Jill's side character far more interesting than Chris as Rebecca. The characters themselves overall really aren't that interesting. Like I said, Barry is the most interesting one. And Jill and Chris, I mean, they do a whole lot, but when they do, it's kind of just whatever. I find Chris far more interesting than Jill personally, but I like playing as Jill better, which I found was a weird trade-off. But this doesn't help with the voice acting that's actually kind of bland, and the dialogue, which is kind of really weird. But it works. It's still an enjoyable story experience, and by the end you're going to be like, wow, that was quite a journey I just went on. But the best character and story this game tells is the story of Lisa Trevor, and this was actually not even in the original Resident Evil. It was added in the GameCube version, and this one it keeps the same thing. And the story of Lisa Trevor is so depressing and so sad, and I recommend looking into it as much as possible because it'll bum you out. And they does such a great job of making you feel really bad for her. But in the end, the story of Resident Evil, well, there is some interesting parts, and more reading about the lore and things that happen in this mansion are far more interesting than the actual story itself. By the end, you're going to have a good time with it. It's going to keep you interested enough to keep going. And yet again, that story of Lisa Trevor just excels and adds an extra layer to the story, which makes it that much more interesting and absolutely worth checking out. But the story, like most survival horror experiences, is not the major highlight. The gameplay is. So the best thing about this game is the gameplay is not so, it's not your generic horror experience where you have really gross monsters, lots of jump scares, and really scary things going on. This game's actually pretty chill in the horror department. There really isn't a whole lot of jump scares, and the one I can think of was actually pretty scary. But beyond that, it's mostly the environment and the feeling of, loneliness and just isolation you feel of walking around this mansion and not knowing what is around the next corner is what gives this game its horror experience. And the tension this game builds with its horror feeling. I mean, the way the game is set up is cameras are set in specific locations, so you can never tell what is around the next corner until the camera changes. And that is what makes this game so intimidating and builds up that tension because you have no clue what's around that next corner. You may hear something, but you have no clue where it is. It could be in any direction, around any corner. And that is what makes this game so intimidating and so scary. And I love this dynamic because it makes the game just far more intimidating than the combat itself. The combat is pretty basic. I mean, you have your certain set of weapons. You can get a pistol, a shotgun, depending on who you play as, because you get some different weapons as different characters. And you use these weapons and the very limited resources to take out the zombies and the different creatures you find. But like I said, the combat is very basic. You can only aim straight, up, and down. That's it. And while this new version adds kind of a lock-on system, so you can lock on to certain enemies, that does help. But in the original version, I don't think the GameCube version has it, you can't lock on to enemies, and so it's really basic, and you gotta really make your shots count because, like I said, the resources are very, very limited. But this yet again builds on this tension and this feeling of isolation and horror because these zombies and creatures really don't move all that fast. but trying to line up those perfect shots and make them count is far more difficult. And this is yet again builds up that tension and kind of that fear inside you, like, crap, this guy's coming at me, I gotta get this shot. And it's really intimidating and really tense, and that's what makes this game so enjoyable. And the other dynamic of this gameplay is the puzzle solving. There's puzzles all over the place in this mansion, and each one was really fresh and unique. And I actually really like this because it made it so you had to start fresh every single time. No two puzzles were the same. There are some that are pretty similar, but they're not the same. The solutions are different and things like that. But none of them were insanely difficult. There is a couple that are really hard, but if you really think about it and you look at all the pieces and make sure you have all the pieces, they're really cool and fun, and you feel so proud of yourself for completing it. But the only one I hate so much is the freaking chemical mixing one. I look at a walkthrough every single time because that thing just so confusing, doesn't even make any sense. I'm sure with how many times I've done it with a walkthrough, I could probably I haven't memorized, I can probably just do it by myself. But that one was insanely difficult. And not all the puzzles were like, here's a bunch of pieces, put them together and figure it out. A lot of them were environmental too. You had to figure out how to get to one place to another, and there was some sort of puzzle in the way that you had to solve. And this was really creative, added a new dynamic to just walking around in the combat. It was just nice to have kind of a good change of pace. So at the very beginning of the review, I said the thing that this game does best is make it accessible to modern audiences, and the biggest thing that this game does is remove tank controls. So if you're not familiar with tank controls, it's that you have to like hold a button, which will make them move, and then you use the joystick to move, or you have to like stop and rotate and then hold the button to go. And just for older audiences, it was fine and it actually added to the tension. But for a more modern audience, people don't appeal to that. That was a lot of things that people I talked to, I'm like, hey, have you played Resident Evil? Like, yeah, but I didn't like the tank controls. And so the thing that this game does to make it more accessible is it removes the tank controls. Now you can just use the joystick and move around freely, which I thought was nice. Yet again, adds accessibility to modern audiences, which this game does really, really well. Graphically, this game does look really, really good. The GameCube version actually still holds up pretty good on its own, but this remastered version does just such a great job. It looks great. Dark rooms are very dark, and the hallways are just super creepy, and just yet again builds this tension that this game does so well. Is it just builds this amazing tension with the environments it has and the different, like the camera angles, just everything works so well all together, and it just blends perfectly, giving you an amazing, tense horror experience. I loved exploring every corner of this mansion because each room was very different and it just kind of had a nice look to it. The biggest thing that this game does is it has a kind of a different style to it. How it's set up is you have like a picture in the background, which is just a pre-rendered background. It's literally just a picture, and then your character and other enemies are like 3D models on this background. So it looks really weird and different, but it works. It works really, really well. And the zombies are really gross and intimidating, and the sound design just really elevates that. The sounds of footsteps or the growling or the moaning of the zombies, it all just elevates this game to the next level, making it the optimal survival horror experience. Technically, this game's pretty flawless. I never had any crashes, freezes, the frame rate was pretty solid, character models did what I wanted them to. The zombies didn't act weird, they acted like zombies that would do exactly what you think a zombie would do, is slowly shuffle around, and if they see something, go at it. And so it works really, really well. My biggest complaint is that when you're moving around the mansion, there's a door animation every single time you open a door. And at first, it was really intimidating and scary because you didn't know what was going to be behind the door. But at certain points, when I had to backtrack or go through several rooms at a time, it just got so annoying. I might not know this, but there might be a way to skip it. I couldn't find a way to skip it, but if there was a way to skip it, and if there is, that would be great. And I just wish I would have found that in my playthrough. So in the end, Resident Evil is a fantastic survival horror experience. Like I said, this game pretty much made the genre. So if you're looking for a great intro, why not start where it all began? This game just was so great. Well, the story was pretty minimal and started pretty basic but got far more complex. It was enhanced by the added Lisa Trevor storyline, which was easily my favorite part. But it builds on the whole world just because the world itself was so well done. The graphics enhanced that by looking so well, and the exploration, combat, and puzzle was a great dynamic. It all just flowed and worked really well together. Just that's the best thing about this game, is the tension it builds with all of its different parts, and the way it just all flows together. Everything just works so well. While the constant door animations were quite irritating and got honestly really boring and annoying, they started out really great. And the boring voice acting and the great sound design, there's just a bunch of different things, but my biggest complaints is the door animation and the boring voice acting. Absolutely, those are my biggest complaints, but everything else is just so well done and so well put together. I think this game is a must play. There are so many things that come together to make this such an enjoyable experience. If you've never played a horror game, this is a fantastic place to start. Even if you don't play the game all the way through, or even if you want to just sit down with a walkthrough and kind of just follow through with a walkthrough, you're going to have a great time. It is just such a fun experience that I would highly recommend to anyone who's looking for a fun, tense-filled horror experience that you're going to have such a great time with. So that's my review for the Resident Evil HD Remaster. It was a fun experience that I'd highly recommend checking it out. And also, if you could hit like and subscribe and the bell to get notified every time I post a new video, that would be greatly appreciated. And also, if you want to head over to my website at GameForYourThoughts.com to check out my written game reviews, that would be cool as well. Thanks as always for all your support, and I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time on A Game For Your Thoughts.